Hi, this is Stephanie with Iron Sharpening Iron, and I'm coming to you today with a special video. Wasn't planning on doing this originally, but it was just on my heart as I was continuing working on what was going to be the final video of the final beast that I just wanted to add this little addendum here. I want to keep this video short. I already prayed beforehand. I'm just gonna kind of jump right into it. This video assumes that you have watched the first two videos of the series and the beast, and especially the last video. So as I was moving along, I just felt like there were some things that I haven't covered, and I just want to be sure when I'm going over prophecy to make it very clear that I don't have all the answers. And for me personally, I like to analyze things and look at different situations, kind of do a checklist, pros, cons, what fits best, and go with that and change my viewpoint as more information becomes available. So I don't want to claim to have all the answers, and I want to explore all the options so that no matter how things play out in the coming days, you are prepared. You know what the prophecy says, you know how to apply it, and so you are less likely to be deceived. Hopefully, we pray in Yahushua's name. Amen. Okay, so let's move into this material here. Okay, so when we were talking about the final beast, I spoke about the European Union, I believe, is the best fit for what that will actually look like. And it's pretty interesting. There was just this article posted talking about the US, Britain, and the EU in this alliance together just after I made that video or posted it. So you see that they are one body working together, these three different heads. So this is a good description of a final beast, of this beast, having these three different heads, US, Britain, and the EU together. But the thought of the EU destroying America out in the open is a little bit hard to swallow looking at our current political events, as it seems that America and the EU are in more of an alliance. Now, of course, there's all this subversion and infiltration and things that are not so obvious to see when you're reading, news and whatnot. There's so much deception out there. So it's kind of hard to fully tease out. So I just want to go over some other possibilities. And so we have not talked about Russia. And, Russia, we look at a map. Obviously, it's very far on the right side of the map, right? Because we're talking about the right head of the eagle being the final head. Moscow is in fact a city on 7 hills. And very interesting that if you look up three-headed eagle, the only thing you can really find is this deal here in St. Petersburg that has these three eagle heads. And St. Petersburg is in Russia, right? Where they have a very famous cathedral here. Russia never was a British colony. And of course, we already established that EU wasn't either, but it was joined to Britain through the League of Nations, and in World War I with the Triple Entente, they were joined together. Russia does fit the Japheth test. It is partially Japheth territory, and the only reason we think maybe Japheth because, well, a couple of things, that it's a continuation of this Roman Empire, and also that the Gog of Magog and Ezekiel, you have all these sons of Japheth and then a few sons of Ham and league together for this end time scenario. It is the land of Magog. Russia is Magog. So, speaking on that, Ezekiel 38, there's a point for Russia right there. And one more thing people will argue for Russia, speaking about Ezekiel 38, let's just go there for a moment. And in some translations, it will read something like this. This is the New Life Version. The word of the Lord came to me saying, Son of man, look toward Gog of the land of Magog, which I already said Magog is the land of Russia, I believe. the leader of Rosh, Meshech, and Tubal, and speak against him. And that Rosh there, people say that's Russia. And so they say that Russia is a part of this Magog, Gog of Magog, and this army that's against Yah. But Rosh is the Hebrew word for head. So it's kind of interesting, speaking of heads and heads of the eagle, that that word head is in there, but I don't think that it actually, Rosh is in any way actually referring to Russia, but you will hear this teaching. If you know Hebrew, you just know Rosh just means head. And the King James, I think, does a better job of translating this, saying the chief prince of Meshech and Tubal, which are all territories of Japheth here, but I thought that was worth mentioning. And we looking at the current events right now, it definitely points more towards Russia being that one to take out America. So we definitely want to keep that one in mind as a possibility. What about China? Again, they are very much on the right side of the map, right? China was in part a British colony in the past. Hong Kong was actually the last British colony to fall way up into my lifetime. This territory was transferred to China in 1997. Current events also show this as a much more likely destroyer of America. You have all this infiltration of American institutions, all these claims that COVID originated from a lab in Wuhan, although it seems like the Americans were very much involved in that, or American government officials and whatnot. And there's been all this rhetoric for years about war with China and Russia, right? This nuclear war and being at odds with each other, that these are these superpowers vying for power as we speak. And some years ago, when myself and a couple of fellow believers were really trying to figure out this Babylon the Great and what is Babylon the Great, we looked up. I've spoken before about Tyre and all these goods that they were trading in. And you look up right now a lot of these goods, and you will find that China is the main exporter importer of these things. And Tyre is a picture of Babylon the Great in the very end. So that is an interesting correlation. And of course, I've distinguished before that Babylon the Great is a city, but it's a part of this empire. So I want to be clear that we distinguish the two, but they're definitely related to each other, right? China is also associated with the dragon, the red dragon. You see, they have their New Year's festival every year with the dragon and dance it all around. It's one of their zodiac signs. And of course, the dragon is associated with Hasatan, right? And we've actually seen, looking at the book of Revelation and Daniel and Second Esdras, and some of these prophecies, the association with the dragon, particularly Revelations, right? But a Japheth connection, not so obvious. Not to say it's very hard to know exactly where everybody's ended up over time, but China is Shem territory, so that doesn't fit as well as Russia would, or the EU. So is Russia the final head? Is China the final head? Or could they play another part in this end time scenario? Now, there is a part of the second Esdras prophecy that I intentionally did not cover because I'm having a harder time figuring out how it fits into the bigger picture, but I just saw something that maybe would explain how this all fits in. So I titled this slide Small and Full of Trouble. So we're going to finish reading up a few of the verses here in Second Esdras that we really haven't gone over. We really won't be covering much on this chapter 11 and 12 in Second Esdras in the last video. So let's just finish out this prophecy. So if you remember, chapter 11, it's the vision, and then chapter 12 primarily is the interpretation. So we're going to go to 11, and we're going to start in verse 23. So All the 12 feathers have disappeared at this point, so we're about to transition power into that first head into Britain. So we'll start in 23. And there was no more upon the eagle's body, but 3 heads that rested, and 6 little wings. Then saw I also that 2 little feathers divided themselves from the 6, and remained under the head that was upon the right side, for the 4 continued in their place. So this is occurring on the right side. Interesting. And I beheld, and lo, the feathers that were under the wing thought to set themselves up, and to have the rule. And I beheld, and lo, there was one set up, but shortly it appeared no more. And the second was sooner away than the first. And I beheld, and lo, the 2 that remained thought also in themselves to reign. And when they so thought, behold, there awaked one of the heads that were at rest, namely, it was that was in the midst, for that was greater than the 2 other heads. So see here, that's when the head wakes up. And then I saw that the 2 other heads were joined with it. And behold, the head was turned with them that were with it, and did eat up the 2 feathers under the wing that would have reigned. Now, I'm not sure who these little wings are exactly, but again, I think it's just more of those other powers raising up all this infighting time. But you have these 2 little feathers that divide themselves from the 6, and they're under that right side on the right head. And then you have this head waking up. The 2 other heads were joined with it. And then that head, the great head, turned and ate up the 2 feathers under the wing that would have reigned. And then you see that that head ruling with great fear and all over the earth, which we spoke about in that first video. So could Russia and China be these 2 little feathers? These are going to come up again. We'll see in the next chapter. We definitely see them united together against the West in general. Russia and China seems to be at odds with America and the EU, Britain, etc. And we've already established that Russia and China are on the right side of the map, and these feathers are on the right side as well. So another question to ask in relating it and trying to piece it together with this prophecy, seeing if it fits, is was Russia and China, have they been taken out by the first head, Britain, as we see happening here in this prophecy? Well, in the Crimean War of the 1850s, Russia lost to Britain, and Britain was in alliance with some other nations fighting against Russia. And then you had the Opium Wars of China of the late 1700s and 1800s, in which Britain subjugated China and really spoiled their wealth, even though they didn't technically control it as a whole as a colony. They certainly still got their money out of it. So we see that before World War I, when Britain really attained their greatest strength and power, they did take out these other 2 potential little feathers here of Russia and China on the right side of this eagle, the body of this eagle, as they are on the right side of the map. And something I don't think I've mentioned in the previous videos is that all these feathers seem to be on the right side that it speaks about. And that's very interesting with the whole map idea that you have America on the left. So there were no feathers that rose up on this left side of the map, right? There weren't other powers over here ruling. It was only America, right? That head that was over there. But all the feathers are over here on the Europe side of the map, reigning and ruling. Interesting. Okay, so let's go to the next chapter, because we already covered everything else, I believe, in this chapter 11. Go to chapter 12, and we're going to read the first 3 verses. And it came to pass while the lion spake these words unto the eagle, I saw. So if you recall in chapter 11, just before this, I'm sorry, you have to skip around a bit trying to get through this prophecy. But the final beast is set up, final head wakes up, the lion comes and pronounces judgment on that eagle empire. So that's where we left off, and we're continuing in chapter 12. And you could see that the interpretation actually doesn't begin until verse 11 in chapter 12. So this is still a continuation of the vision that was occurring in chapter 11. Okay, so here we go. And it came to pass while the lion spake these words unto the eagle, I saw, and behold, the head that remained and the 4 wings appeared no more, and the 2 went on to it and set themselves up to reign, and their kingdom was small and full of uproar. And I saw, and behold, they appeared no more, and the whole body of the eagle was burnt. So the earth was in great fear. Then awaked I out of the trouble and trance of my mind, and from great fear, and said in my spirit. So we have, after this eagle with all its heads are awake, or the final head is reigning, that the lion comes, destroys it. It appears no more, right? The head that remained and the four wings appeared no more. And then the two went on to it. Remember, there were six wings under that right side, and there were two that were going to set themselves up to reign, but they got eaten. Well, it seems like they're still there, though, right? And that actually verifies what I've said before, that just because these things seem to go away or they disappear doesn't mean that they're really gone, right? These kingdoms are still there. They're just not the one reigning in power at the time. So once this final head reigns, it seems like there is still one more small kingdom. There's uproar, there's problems, there's full of trouble that still reigns afterwards. And let's just read the interpretation real quick. 2 Ezra 12:29 through 30. And whereas thou sawest two feathers under the wings passing over the head that is on the right side, it signifieth that these are they whom the highest has kept unto their end. This is the small kingdom and full of trouble, as thou sawest. And these interpretation verses just confirm what I just said about the smaller kingdom after this head on the right side that reigns, that's small and full of trouble. So a few more points to make here. You see that after this small kingdom, then the entire eagle is burned up, right? Her whole body, and the whole earth was in great fear. Could that burning up of that eagle body mean like literal judgment, burning, nuclear war, fire and brimstone, Sodom and Gomorrah, right? I mean, the whole earth was in fear afterwards. And how does this fit if Messiah already came back and he's established this new kingdom, this new earth, everything's come down? How do we still have this other kingdom reigning that seems to be full of trouble and problematic? So let's try to tease this out. Let's go to Revelation chapter 19. In chapter 19, you have the destruction of Babylon the Great, and then you have the beasts and the kings of their earth, and their armies are all gathered together to make war against him that sat on the horse and against his army, on Messiah, right? And the beast and the false prophet and those that took the mark, all of them that worship the beast, these are cast alive into the lake of fire, burning with brimstone. Seems like the end, right? And then this angel comes down with the key in chapter 20, with the key to the bottomless pit. And he takes the dragon, Satan, and he bounds him for 1,000 years. And he puts him in the bottomless pit. But after 1,000 years, he's released again for a little season. And Messiah reigns for 1,000 years. And then in chapter 20 and we'll start in verse 7. And when the 1,000 years are expired, Satan shall be loosed out of his prison and shall go out to deceive the nations which are in the four quarters of the earth, Gog and Magog, to gather them together to battle, the number of whom is as the sand of the sea. And they went up on the breadth of the earth and compassed the camp of the saints about in the beloved city, and the fire came down from God out of heaven and devoured them. Now, we've talked about Ezekiel 38:39 a bit, and it's coming up here again, that it seems like part of this prophecy is occurring now and in the days to come, but some of it's really not going to happen and be fulfilled until the very end, after Messiah's millennial reign, that this Gog Magog war, final iteration of it, occurs. So could China and Russia possibly be reigning during the millennial reign that this kingdom is there? Maybe. I mean, it's kind of hard to imagine that it's full of trouble and uproar while Messiah is reigning, right? I don't know. Just the way I've always seen the millennial kingdom, it's going to be this time that it's beautiful, it's peaceful, it's nice. There's not all this trouble going on. And then I saw the War Scroll. I have a great interest in the Dead Sea Scrolls, and I still have a lot of work to do on reading them and interpreting them and trying to apply it. And I have a very basic reading of this at this point, so take it for what you will. But in the War Scroll, it describes this war that it seems Messiah comes back, and this war drags on for years, and they're taking back all this land, and it starts with the Katim. And anyone who has studied much on these biblical prophecy and the groups know the Katim are the Romans, the Italians, the Roman Empire revived, right? That's what we've been talking about. This final beast head is the Roman Empire revived with all these different people groups involved. And those people have to be taken out as the final beast. But it also describes all these other people groups in there that they are warring against as well. And it seems to be a lot of the sons of Ham and Japheth that we're talking about with Ezekiel. So I've always kind of felt like Messiah comes back and it's like over in, a minute, an hour, and he's reigning and everything's good. But what if it's not that quick and that easy? What if there is this war that continues on for some years, and during this period of time, you have the China and Russia possibly, or whoever these two feathers are, reigning with this small kingdom for a short time until Messiah establishes reign and control over the earth for his 1,000 years, and then releases the devil later on. Now, there are some issues with Russia and China being these two feathers. So let's talk a little more about that. It's hard to imagine a kingdom of Russia and China reigning together that you would consider small, right? It's pretty huge landmass, just those two countries put together. But if we go to Jubilees, we see that people took more land than they're really supposed to have. So maybe they would go back to their original land grants as a possibility. Another issue with Russia and China being these two smaller feathers, if we go back to 2nd Ezra chapter 11, is that it seems like the two heads are joined with the great head. So the three heads are joined together. And then after that, we see that these two feathers get eaten up. And although Britain was in alliance with some other nations at the time Russia was taken down, they really came together with the other heads with the institution of the League of Nations, or going back to World War I and World War II, where you had certain alliances in place. Now, these alliances have changed over time, but I do want to look at World War I for a moment. So in World War I, you had these two opposing alliances, the Triple Entente, which was France, Russia, and Britain, and the Triple Alliance, which was Germany, Austria, Hungary, and Italy. Interesting that there are 6 here, and we have these 6 wings on this right side, right? And America also joined with Britain and Russia and France later on in the war, and many other nations were involved. And if in fact this is the beast, the heads all coming and joining together during World War I, that would lend itself more towards Russia being the final head, as it was part of that alliance with Britain and France and also the United States. But we can definitely see that during this time, these powers coming together, and they're opposed to these other powers. And Austria and Germany really got taken out, right? A couple of times, World War I, World War II, and they kept trying to rise to power. So maybe Germany and Austria is really a better picture anyway of what these small feathers could be, as it is definitely a smaller kingdom. And they have tried to raise to power a couple of times in the previous century. And now again, we're seeing them aligning together with these COVID measures and having mandatory vaccinations at this point in time. So I'd say that's another one to watch for these two smaller feathers. So there's something else that we should look at here. Maybe these two feathers are not actually the two feathers that get eaten up anyway. So let's go back to chapter 11 and look at this a little more closely and try to tease this out. It gets confusing because it's talking about feathers and it's talking about wings and it's talking about two and two and two, and which two are we talking about? So Back to verse 24. Then saw I also that 2 feathers divided themselves from the 6 and remained under the head that was upon the right side, for the 4 continued in their place. So the 2 are removed. Now we have this 4. And behold, the feathers that were under the wing thought to set themselves up and to have the rule. And there was one set up, and then there's a second one set up. So 4 minus 2, we have 2 left. Those other 2 are separated from this. And then look, the 2 that remain thought also to set themselves up and to reign. And then we see the heads coming together and eating up those 2 feathers. Then after that, in chapter 12, verses 1 through 3, we see those other 2 feathers that were set aside for the end. They come into the play. So maybe Britain didn't have to take out China and Russia anyway. And they are, in fact, those last 2 feathers to come into play, or somebody else. We'll see. And Austria and Germany, or Germany and Italy, depending on how you want to look at it, were the 2 feathers that did get eaten up by all those heads with World War I and World War II. Then the second head is reigning. Then the third head will reign. And then there is these 2 feathers to come at the very end. And I should mention as well that the final beast head gets taken out by the sword as well. And I believed that that was Messiah's sword. But it's possible that it is in fact these 2 little feathers whose sword will take out that final head before Messiah takes them out and takes this eagle out finally, completely. But we don't know how much time is left, and things could change a lot till then. And I don't think it's that important what these other 2 small feathers are, because hey, we got to get to this final head first, right? And what comes after that, let it be what it's going to be. But he did leave these clues here in the scriptures for us so we can try to decipher these things. So the way I'm seeing it now, I still think the European Union fits better as final head, that these 2 feathers are Russia and China or some other combination that is ruling and reigning after the demise of the final beast, after Messiah comes back for the short period of time until he fully establishes rule over this 49-year period, possibly, that we see in the War Scroll. If you guys have any other ideas about what could be going on here with these 2 feathers and what's happening with this seeming to happen after the final beast. I mean, it said that this is the beast prophesied in Daniel, and it seems this is the same beast that talks about in Revelation. So how is this other thing going on after it? So if you guys have any ideas, please share, please comment. I love to get your ideas. I love to hear everybody's ideas about prophecy. I don't claim to have all the answers. For me personally, I just want to hear all the different possibilities so I can be prepared no matter what. So since I originally recorded this video on around February 21st, some big developments have occurred in Russia and with Ukraine, and things have gone hot over there. So I just want to say, even more so, keep your eye on Russia as a potential final head. I think it's worth mentioning as well that we've spoken in the previous videos about the League of Nations, the United Nations. These organizations formed out of a world war. World War I led to the League of Nations. The whole idea was that we're going to have this governing body that's going to maintain the peace, right? Peace and security. And then that failed. You had World War II, and then they formed the United Nations. Oh, let's get the US involved, kind of grow this organization. Now we got it under control. Now we won't go into world wars. But all this stuff all along has been manufactured by the elite, by the cabal, by the descendants of the Phoenicians, by demons, devils working behind these people to bring about this agenda. So is it feasible that World War III, which we could be on the cusp of right now, would bring the final international organization that's part of this final beast, the final head of the beast? It is definitely a possibility, something to watch out for. So anyway, eyes on Russia, eyes on this conflict. China is amping up their rhetoric towards Taiwan at the same time. And you have all these NATO alliance countries in these pacts together that if there's any provocation with any of them, just like World War One, just like World War Two, then all these other nations get drug into the battle, whether they want to or not, because they have these treaties together. So, oh, Father, help us all in Yahushua's name. Amen. And please pray for the people of this earth everywhere. We need prayer right now very much. It is on my heart from the Father. So thank you, everyone. I hope y'all got something out of this video, and blessings. And with that, I will say shalom.